Hello guys, welcome to Ask Ragul. Today we're going to see an interesting topic, and which is called IoT. It's one of my favorite subject, and it's IoT, Internet of Things. So today we're going to see what is IoT, and if you want to start a career in IoT, what you have to do, or a hobbyist, doesn't matter what you want to do, and what is the future of IoT, and what sort of companies you look for, and what sort of roles that are available, and what sort of technologies, and how to get started. So that is what we're going to see. All right, so first thing is, what is IoT? IoT means Internet of Things. That means anything that you see which talks to internet, and then it gives some information about what's happening outside, like a sensor, or could be something which is listening, or could be something which is like a camera, but doing processing some images and giving some more intelligent information. They all belong to a field called IoT. So examples of IoT that we use every day. So a lot of those things. One is if you use a GoPro camera, and which is like a camera that you can fit into your car, and then it detects the speed that you're traveling, the acceleration, and then shows that on the display when you play the videos. So that is one simple example of IoTs that we use. A lot of people use it. And apart from that, anything that you use which sends some information, could be a coffee machine, and could be a fire alarm, and could be your heater, your refrigerator, your washing machine, anything that is sending some information back to you through a mobile app or a TV, television, whatever it could be. So that is an IoT, Internet of Things. Now, Internet of Things. So what is it happening now? Is it something new? No. It was there for a long time. It was called it as embedded engineering. So people from electronics field have been doing this lot of these things for the past 40-50 years. So as long as electronics was out there, and people are actually designing a lot of devices, and a lot of these things we use every day. Now, why there is so much buzz around it right now? So the embedded systems was actually a sort of closed field, and it wasn't that fancy for a lot of hobbyists and a lot of children and a lot of people to get into it. And it was a field where it was having access. People who are coming from electronics background had an access to it. Now with the internet, with the invent of internet, and with a lot of entrepreneurs coming into this field, IoT was an introductory for people to get into electronics and robotics, to build some cool robots and cool devices that can actually talk to each other and talk to humans. So that is when it got popular. Now with IoTs, if you see, there is a whole bunch of things that goes in there, and a lot of industry that works around it, and it is actually one of the toppest and highest growing industry. So if you want to get a job, and if you want to get a high profile job, and at the same time you are something very ambitious, and at the same time you are talented, and this is something you can look into it. Now give you some examples of things that you can do with IoT. Okay, so let's say you are actually in the field, like you are into agriculture, and you want to monitor how much of moisture the soil has, and then you want to do irrigation, that is watering the plants based on the moisture level. That means whenever the moisture level goes down, you want to water it. And if that is something you want to do it, then yes, you can build a small sensor, you can put into the soil, which will monitor the moisture in the soil, and then whenever it's low, it will automatically send the signal to the back station, and that will actually send a signal to the water pumps to actually pump some more water in the desired location. So that is one example that you can do with IoT. Similarly, a lot of things such as industries. If you see a lot of conveyor belts based production units, you can automate a lot of things like QCs, packaging, labeling, and quantity measurements, and visual checks. A lot of these things you can use IoT to improvise or automate. Now let's get started. So getting started in IoT. So this is a field where a lot of different business units join together to make something. So there could be hardware engineers who design the hardwares, and there will be people who understand the data. They are data scientists, and they actually make intelligent information out of the data coming from different sensors and different actuators. And there could be people who actually design the product on the whole. That means when you have a requirement that you want to make a prototype of a drone which does certain things, and if it's not available in the market, then you need someone to design the product. And on top of all of these things, you need someone like a solution architect who design the entire solution from the hardware perspective to the specification to the components that is used and the back-end architecture and the communication protocols. So this is all goes together to make one successful IoT product. This comes under a head of a solution architect who define what has to happen on each of those things, and then a product designer takes it and then creates a product, and then these hardware engineer, software engineer, and other guys will join together to make firmwares and softwares that work together. So now, if you want to have a successful career in IoT, you need to have basics of everything. So typically, if you look at civil engineering, mechanical, and IT, a lot of these professions, people do a very cocoon job. That means they focus on a certain tunnel, and then they do the job inside the tunnel. They don't really care about what the other trades do, what the other skills that people do in the office. They just focus on what they do. That is not going to work in IoT. If you want to have a long, sustainable, successful career in IoT, you need to know what is happening around the space, because you may be and you may have to jump between those things. So as I said, you don't have to be an expert in designing hardware, but at the same time you need to know what those guys do and what sort of time frame it takes, and what are those different devices they use, and what information we can get from those devices. And the information that we get, what sort of information? Is it an ASCII? Is it like a general string, or is it numbers, integers, decimals? What sort of values we get, and what sort of value ranges, what those values mean to us in real world? You need to have an overall understanding of a lot of those things. Let's say if you got a sensor which is measuring temperatures, and if you don't know what sort of values you get, we don't know how to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit and all these sort of stuff, then you're not an IoT engineer, not someone who's going to come and teach you how to do this work and what the sensor do. So if it's a temperature sensor, it's going to send temperatures. If it's a stepper motor, you need to know what's the rotation on it and what angle it is and what direction it is in. So that is what the information it's going to do. So that's the same thing which let's say if there is another motor like a servo or stepper, and we got motors which doesn't actually give you those sort of information. You need to know what those different types of motors out there. You need to have a basic idea of everything, what's happening around the space. And so next thing is, even though you may not be a hardware engineer, my best suggestion is get started with Arduino and Raspberry Pis. So they're the best, easy to start with to get to an understanding of how different things works in IoT. It could be a home pet project, it could be something very small, but it gives you a lot of information and gives you an overall understanding of how different elements work together when they're put together. So understanding of Arduino and Raspberry Pi, I would say it's a sort of like a mandatory requirement. If you say that you're an IoT engineer and if you don't have these two words on your resume, people are not going to be very much impressed. And if they have it in there, it's not that it's going to be a superstar profile, but at least they know that you know the basics. This is not something super, but it's just the basics. So have a bit of an understanding of Arduino and Raspberry. There are plenty of tutorials that's out there, and you can get hold of some of them, and you can actually do some of those tutorial videos in there. So to give you an idea, so this is actually a Raspberry, this is an Arduino, and this is the Raspberry Pi board. So you can actually build simple devices using these ones. And so let's say if you're building these ones, you need to know C, programming in C, and whereas this one, it gives you more options. It depends on what flavor of operating system that you put it onto this one. So you can have Windows IoT 10 core, and so that means you can have .NET on top of it, and you can program in any language that you wanted. And the default language will be C# or VB, so that will be the default language. But this gives you Windows, so that means you can do a lot of stuff with .NET. And at the same time, you got a Linux-based OS. So there is actually a noob OS, that's a basic starting OS that you can do it, and then Debian and a lot of other different flavors of Linux that you can load it on top of this one. And with this one, you can do a lot of things depending on what OS did you have and what sort of programming language and what sort of framework that you use and what you want to build, choose your framework. So that means it is powerful and you can do this. And it's both of these are very easy to get started. And then on top you got ESP32. There are smaller MCUs, microcontroller units, where you can actually program things. And then you got Intel Edison. There's actually a really smaller one, but it actually comes with Wi-Fi and some of these sensors as well. And the coolest thing with these ones is you have to see what this board offers you. So they generally offer you IO pins. That's basically you can connect sensors to it, and it will receive information, it can send commands out. So that's sort of basic things most of these boards do. And apart from that, let's say if you take Raspberry Pi for an example, it gives you a connection to USB ports. So let's say you can even connect keyboards and mouse to it. And if you've got any other USB devices, you can connect it and you can read data from it. At the same time, you got Ethernet ports, so you can directly connect to an network, and so you can pretty much plug in straight away to internet. At the same time, these ones have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and HDMI output as well. So if you want to connect to a monitor to display some information onto board, like sort of like a dials or some sort of a graphical output, you can easily do that with the Raspberry Pi. And there are lots of other boards out there that you can try it out, but my suggestion would be to try these two to get started. And Arduinos are really great for simple examples. And remember, C is a structured oriented language. That means there is no OOPS. That means every function you have to write one after the other. Whereas with this one, you can write OOPS based languages. That means you can create a function and you can reference it at any number of times in any part of your program, which is going to be a lot more smarter, and at the same time the time that you spent is worthwhile. So that's just the basics of getting started with Arduinos and Raspberry Pis. And at the same time, if you want some other options, you got Netduino. This is a very small company compared to these guys. These are really popular, and whereas these ones are not as popular as these ones. But if you are programming in .NET, and if you want to straight away do C# without having Windows or anything else on top of it, this is a great one. So this has got a .NET Micro framework, and which you can install it as a firmware, and you can start programming using C# straight away. So that means if you got some specific purpose and you don't want to have the hassle of installing Windows or any other operating systems, then this is great. You install a firmware and then straight away you can start programming using C#. This is really cool. And so I have done a small rover kind of project using this one, and it's the quickest way to do prototypes. I'll actually add a video of the prototype which I've done as well, so you can check it.